Hello and welcome to this video. Today I'll be talking to you on a very sensitive topic, handling the death of a loved ones. What are the lessons we can learn from Bhagavad Gita? This I'll be talking to you about in this particular video, how to handle death of a loved ones. The death of a loved one is the one of the most difficult, most painful experience in life. It brings with it sorrow, confusion, and a deep sense of loss. However, the Bhagavad Gita, which is one of the most revered texts in Sanatana Dharma, which is a kind of instruction manual for the humankind, provides timeless wisdom on how to understand and deal with the death of loved ones. Through the teachings of Lord Krishna to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, we can find solace and deeper understanding of life, death, and the eternal nature of the soul can be understood by understanding and reading and repeatedly reading and understanding Bhagavad Gita. So in this talk, I will share how the Bhagavad Gita teaches us to cope with the death of our near and dear ones, based on a very key shlokas and their interpretations. How to understand them, we will be talking about in this video. So, the point number one is the eternal nature of the soul. The Bhagavad Gita 2.20 tells us, "Na jayate mriyate va kadachi, naya bhutva bhavita va na bhuyah, ajo nitya shashvatoyam purano, na hanyate hanyamane sharire." The soul is never born, nor does it ever die. It has not come into being, does not come into being, and will not come into being. The soul is eternal, ever existing, undying, and primeval. It is not slain, whereas the body is slain. So let's understand what we spoke about in a minute. When someone passes away, we often think they are gone forever. However, Lord Krishna reminds us that the soul, which is the true identity of every being or every individual, which never dies. The body is temporary, but the soul is eternal. And this teaching helps us to understand that the death is merely a transition for the soul from one body to another. Much like the changing of clothes. Recognizing the eternal nature of the soul, it helps to alleviate the pain, the loss, because we understand that the loved one has not perished but simply moved to another phase of existence. Number two, death is inevitable. Bhagavad Gita 2.27. Let's understand the shlok. Jatasya hi dhruvo mrityur dhruvam janma mritasya cha tasmad pariharyerthe natvam shochitum arhasi. For one who has taken birth, death is inevitable and is certain to happen. For the one who is dead, birth is certain. Therefore, you should not lament over the inevitable. Let me explain a bit more on this. Lord Krishna explains that the death is a natural part of life, just as the birth is certain to happen. The death is inevitable for all the living beings. There is no point in lamenting over what is bound to happen. This teaching encourages us to accept the cycle of birth and death as the part of natural order of life. While the pain of the losing someone is real, we should remember that it is a real transition we all must go through. Understanding this fact can help us to process grief with more acceptance and peace. Third point, that is grief. Grief and attachments. So what Bhagavad Gita says on this point? In 2.14, the shlok says, Matra sparshastu konteya shitoshna sukhadu kada agma paino nityastan stitikshasva bharat, means, O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course of time are like the appearance and disappearance of summer and winter. So these seasons, the way the summer comes, the way the winter comes, they arise from the sense perception. So this is very important to understand something which is coming from our sense perception, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So this is very, very important to understand. The grief, like happiness, is a temporary emotion. It comes and goes, and just like changing the seasons, Lord Krishna is explaining and advising us to tolerate these dualities of life, whether they are joy or sorrow, success or failure, happiness or grief. By practicing this tolerance and understanding that emotions are fleeting, we can navigate through the sorrow of losing a loved ones with a balanced mind. This does not mean we should suppress our emotions, but rather we should not let them overwhelm us. Recognizing their transient nature, we should not become so overwhelmed, right? Fourth is detachment and the role of karma. Bhagavad Gita 3.30 explains this beautifully. And the shlok goes as Mai sarvani karmani sanyasya chetasa nirashir nirmamo bhutva yudhyasva vigatajvara. Means, therefore, O Arjuna, surrender all your works unto me with full knowledge of me, without desires for profit, with no claims to the proprietorship, and free from lethargy, just fight it out. So when we experience the loss of a loved ones, the attachments and the grief often cloud our judgment. Krishna advises Arjuna to perform his duties. As is a Kshatriya, the Kshatriya's duty is to fight. But that should be done with detachment and surrendering everything to Krishna, to God. In the context of death, this teaching encourages us to trust in God, and the God's greater plan has to be trusted. The soul's journey guided by karma is beyond our control. So we should not cling to the possessiveness or excessive attachments to any form, any situation, as each soul is on its own spiritual path. Letting go with faith in God allows us to honor the departed soul without being bound by the sorrow. Fifth point is the soul's journey and the rebirth. So this point has to be understood by Bhagavad Gita 2.22. The shlok goes like this: Vasansi jirnani yatha vihaya navani grihnati naro parani tatha sharirani vihaya jirna nyanyani sanyati navani dehi. As a person puts on new garments, giving up the older ones, the soul similarly accepts the new material bodies, giving up the old ones and the useless ones. The old and useless bodies have to be given up, and the new body has to be taken up. So the Krishna likens the body to the clothing, explaining that just as we change our clothes, the soul is going to change the body. When they are worn out, the soul changes the body. When one body becomes unfit, which can happen at any age, if somebody is sick and dies, so the body is useless. So understanding that the death is simply the soul discarding the old body and moving into a new one gives us a broader perspectives on the life and death. It helps us realize that the death is not an end, but a continuation of the soul's journey. So this understanding can bring comfort in times of grief. Sixth point to understand here is focus on your own spiritual journey. Bhagavad Gita 8.5 says that this is, of course, when you are going to die. Remember the shlok very well. Ant kale chamamev smaran muktva kalevaram ya prayati samadbhavam yati nastyatra sanshay. Means, what's the translation of this? Whoever at the time of death quits his body, remembering me alone, at once attains my nature, and of this there is no doubt. So remember, at the time of death, in the last breath, if you remember Lord Krishna, you are definitely going to go to his Golak Dham. So Krishna is teaching that at the time of death, if one remembers him, one attains liberation. While grieving, it is essential to focus on our own spiritual progress, ensuring that we live in a way that prepares us for the moment of our own departure. By remembering Krishna and cultivating a relationship with him, we can transcend the cycle of birth and death. So your connection with Lord Krishna is very, very important. Therefore, rather than being consumed by sorrow, we should use the experience of loss to deepen our devotion and focus on God. So the conclusion, what's the conclusion of what all we have discussed so far? The Bhagavad Gita offers profound wisdom on how to cope with the death of a loved one, and it teaches us that the soul is the eternal, that death is inevitable, and that grief, while natural, should be managed with understanding and acceptance, right? By embracing detachment and recognizing the transient nature of emotions and focusing on our spiritual progress, we can find peace even in the face of loss. Death, though painful, is a part of the soul's journey, and by learning from the Bhagavad Gita, we can approach it with wisdom, strength, and the faith in the eternal nature of life. So let us take solace in the teachings of the Lord Krishna's song, that is Bhagavad Gita, and remember that through devotion and understanding we can navigate the challenges of life and death with grace and clarity. So this is all in this video. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Hari Bol.